Testing, testing. I'm off that Knott's Berry Kush. This shit ain't nothing to me, man. It is freezing out there. Can you believe it was only just Halloween? Actually, hold on. I got something for you. No, I insist. Come on, you'll like it. Just open it. What do you think? What is it? Those are papers. You're being served for continuous and severe violations of California's labor laws. You'll be speaking to my attorney. Now, I know. I said I'd be doing a follow-up after the lawsuit wrapped up.
Humble under God. That's what fun means.
But with the kind of things that I found, you're gonna want to hear this. Let me get out of this sweater though, because it is hot in here. In the last video, we went over allegations and uncovered the plot to bankrupt the game studio Lab Zero, which resulted in the creation of a new company named Future Club, and also how the private conversations between employees and their own conduct did not reflect the stories in their public statements made against the programmer Mike Z, who we now know since roughly November of the same year was officially diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder severity level 1. Since then, I've been in direct contact with ex-employees, received exclusive meetings and interviews, uncovered a corrupt journalist involved in the story, and have read through the entirety of the legal case to bring to you the details of their never-before-seen internal investigation. Firstly, however, a lot of you seem to be very passionate about my choice of wording for the recent censorship in Skullgirls. My response to that is, fuck you, you write a 24-page script. Hey guys, Editor Tech here. SonicFox wanted to point out how he was massively annoyed that I cited him for the Mike BLM controversy, so I responded to him saying that I did reach out to him in private a month before the video dropped to get his comment on the situation, and he didn't say anything. Then he says, no comment means no comment, not an indicator of support for him for your video, and accuses me of trying to build a narrative, and he's right. No comment does mean no comment. Ignoring somebody and not saying anything does not mean no comment when you directly made comments about the situation that's being cited. So when you say things like, he can be abrasive and an asshole, but he ain't no racist, and then I cite that in my video as a statement you made during the controversy, that's not me building a narrative, that's me quoting what you said. The fact that you turned around 2 months later and said, fuck you, Mike, go seek help, doesn't change that. It's also really not that relevant to the situation, so I hope you realize that as we're arguing about this, the white man is continuing to strip us of our rights. We shouldn't be fighting, brother. Let's focus on what really matters, okay? Back to the video. But more importantly, there's an overwhelming debate about who specifically created Skullgirls going on in my comments, and some of you have made some great arguments. As far as the IP is concerned, Alex Ahad gets the credit for conceptualizing the characters, the world, and a portion of the movesets. You gotta give some of the credit to the art and design team. But what some of you are suggesting is that the guy who created the engine the game runs on and the gameplay itself shouldn't be considered a creator. Unless we're talking about a visual novel, I think it's more than fair to consider both of them a co-creator while still properly attributing the world itself to Alex. I apologize for any confusion with the title of the previous video before it was changed, as I meant no disrespect to Alex. I promise it was purely harmless clickbait. Guilty as charged. But as a show of good faith, I have a real present for you. I've actually managed to get in touch with Alex, because I want to let all of you know, once and for all, the real reason why Alex Ahad was fired from Lab Zero. It was summarized to me as communication breakdown, an air of hostility, and feeling like he was excluded from most of the team. But he doesn't attempt to accuse any one side of being completely at fault. However, the final straw was when Alex realized he was being phased out of story development on Indivisible, even though a significant portion involved his own culture, and he decided to openly express his grievances, at which point he was fired. According to Alex and the team, it really seems like an ongoing feud between the art team and Alex. They would talk shit about how he doesn't understand how games work, how he was hard-headed with bad ideas, and Mariel, the lead animator, said, quote, I'm thinking about how we're probably letting Alex go, in part because he's bad to work with as a person, but more so that we've run out of things for him to do. Oof, I guess the story on Indivisible wasn't one of those things. Even if it were Mike's decision, he only had so much power in the company at this point in time, seeing as how most decisions, up until their final weeks, were decided by a majority vote of the board of directors. This was not the heavy-handed, putting my foot down era for Mike quite yet. I followed up with asking if they ever held any meetings to address this continually referenced air of hostility, and his response was that I can't recall a company-wide meeting to address any communication issues overall, and that due to the schedule pressure and the need to get work done, and how these problems may be more apparent in hindsight, I don't think there was any time for a meeting of that nature. He also expressed that if there was an issue with the quality of his work, it was never properly communicated to him. That's really all there is to it. Artists thought he was an arrogant dick, and Alex felt like there was a breakdown of communication. As is the case with the rest of this story, a lack of context has led to a significant amount of speculation on the part of the community. If only we had someone who worked there that knew about these intimate details, but wasn't involved in a lawsuit so we could talk to them. Well, that's exactly what I did. Remember our buddy Beezul from the last video? Despite my jokes, and how brief the segment was, we seem to at least agree on one thing. No one at the company took these conduct complaints seriously, actively enabled it, and even pretended like it was a recent revelation when it became news. But to take it a step further, raise the ante, if you will, what if I told you that a journalist received full recordings that proved Lab Zero ignored complaints about Mike since 2018 on the same day that Bunny Ayu's DMs dropped, and decided not to report on it? What if I told you that Francesca planned to leave the company in 2018 over Mike and Peter's behavior, but changed her mind after becoming CEO? What if I told you that she shared this plan with Beezul, and we have all of the evidence to prove it? All in due time, but let's start from the top and work our way down. Most of you are probably acquainted with this story because of articles written by the likes of journalists such as Ian Walker, whose tenure at Shoryuken and Kotaku have produced many stories revolving around the gaming community. In my research, I happened across one line, which led me down a rabbit hole I never even would have known existed if it weren't for evidence provided by Beezul. On June 29, 2020, Francesca said, well, we should talk about what we're gonna do / say as a company, if at all, because Earl's Kotaku reporter friend was asking for a comment. If you don't know who Earl is, he was a designer at Lab Zero and is currently a designer at Future Club. It didn't take long at all to discover who the reporter they were alluding to was, because there's only one person at Kotaku who has written at least 4 articles about this story, and that just so happens to be Ian Walker. As if it wasn't obvious enough, I also follow Earl, so I immediately saw that they were mutuals. Just very, very fucking obvious who it was. I reached out to him because I was concerned that there may have been a conflict of interest in his reporting, given this quote, his position, and associates. But he didn't respond to my first message, which is fair, okay? I know that people can be busy or just miss it, so I sent a reminder 4 days later. Still, nothing. That's why when I saw him tweet about his availability for interviews while bitching about his previous boss, I knew that it would be the perfect time to remind him. He then did something I thought was really strange. He deleted the tweet I was replying to, blocked and unblocked me so I wasn't following him anymore, and I knew that for a fact because I was following him with alerts on to make sure that he wasn't like active on Twitter or something if he was gonna be ignoring my messages for like over a week. It turns out he's very active, probably more active than he should be for someone actively seeking employment. But after all of that was done, he finally responded to my DMs. At least now we could just talk about his articles, right? Well, beyond clarifying that his relationship with Earl was purely professional from his time at Shoryuken, and that he was out of work for over a year, he didn't actually answer any of my questions. Of course, me being the little scamp I am, I deliberately hid the fact that I already knew the answers, simply because I wanted to first see if there was a real explanation or accident made in good faith, without the need for unnecessary confrontation. Unfortunately, he tried to bullshit me after I waited an hour for him to pretend to go through emails on his old computer just so he could jog his memory about his talks with Beezul. So instead, I told him I had the full 45-minute recording of his hazy interview where he was provided an hour-long meeting as evidence, and he immediately ghosted me. I don't mean he went on hiatus for the holidays. This man was tweeting every single day. You have 3,000 followers and no job. There's no way your inbox is that full. He claimed that his coverage was thorough and by the books, and focused on the individuals who came out about Mike Z's inappropriate behavior. So why, I ask you, can I find some articles that mention Beezul's story that dropped the same day, and none of them are written by Ian Walker? despite telling him at the end of their interview that he'll make sure to represent him well.
I'll make sure to let my editors know what I've heard and what you're comfortable with sharing, and we'll make sure that you're represented.
Okay.
You're represented well.
I might just be a crazy YouTuber with a tie and a vest, but that doesn't sound very thorough to me. Do you even know what pops up when you look up Ian Walker Kotaku on YouTube? I'll give you a hint. It's not your hard-hitting investigative journalism. It's a 7.5-minute video of critical shitting on you for bringing up Joe Biden and COVID in a PlayStation 5 review.
What the fuck does any of this have to do with anything regarding the PlayStation 5? He goes off on this long tangent reminding everyone that the world's not in great shape at the moment. Why? What is the fucking point?
So you'll have to excuse me if I'm a little bit skeptical about the thoroughness of your article you made in one day. Let's ignore the fact that you were obviously going for a sexism angle and only used Beezul for his sources, because this is already starting to look bad for you.
Like I said, I'm expecting more stories just from people I know in the fighting game community. I'm expecting more stories about Mike in terms of the sexism angle to come out. And I obviously don't want to ignore the racist stuff.
Oh, right.
As the story progresses, I'll probably start adding more of that in.
Who were these sources that told you more stories on Mike would drop, and why would you ignore confirmation that the company you're reporting on was complicit in the behavior you claim to be the focus of your article?
I just want you to also be open to whatever things they're going to tell you, and that like everyone can kind of have a chance to express how they feel without getting defensive about it.
Mike has made like an inappropriate racial joke towards me, looking like a hoodlum or a thug. I've told you that multiple times, like, look, this is a really inappropriate joke.
He still does it?
He hasn't done it recently, a little bit, but originally, when I told you that, all you told me to do was talk to him about it, and I had already spoke to him about it. So, like, no one holds Mike accountable for how he talks to people.
The only reason you'd have to do that is because that was the same conclusion your inside sources agreed on in their private group chat, to avoid legal culpability. To explain it in a way that even a game journalist can understand, the Russians interfered with the US election for Trump, and Fox News silenced the minority whistleblower so they could get beta access to Spider-Man 2. Did that not make any sense? Good. Now you know how it feels. If cherry-picking sources and biased reporting is thorough and by the books, then I honestly have no idea why he was out of work for over a year. It should have been way longer. But unsurprisingly, that really only scratches the surface of what Ian, after 4 articles, never bothered digging into. Going through all of these legal documents myself to find the answers wasn't exactly an easy process. If I had a team of lawyers working overtime, I could have cracked this case months ago. If you've ever been in a car accident or dealt with your own legal nightmare, you could probably understand just how intimidating the whole process is. But with the help of the largest personal injury law firm in America, Morgan & Morgan can deal with the headache for you in 8 clicks or less without ever leaving your couch. And get this, you only pay if you win. No upfront costs, sign-up fees, nada. They might be the biggest personal injury law firm in America, but they specialize in so many other practice areas, it's no wonder they get 3 million calls a year. Hey, Smash community, you see this? Morgan & Morgan has you covered. Long gone are the days of twitlongers and YouTube videos. Wait, look at those handsome Florida licensed labor lawyers. And with over 100 offices and 800 local lawyers nationwide, you can bet there's hundreds more just like them. If I had that many lawyers, maybe I'd have a consistent upload schedule for once. So if you're in an accident or a workplace related issue like Lab Zero, check out Morgan & Morgan. Check out Morgan & Morgan by clicking the link in the description. That's www.forthepeople.com/technicals. Or you can get in touch by dialing #law, that's #529 from your cell phone to get started. A sincere thank you to Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring this video. Before, I mentioned a plan Francesca shared with Beezul to exit Lab Zero prior to her becoming the CEO. Text messages dated July 31st, 2018 prove her talks about strategically backing out of the company, as well as apologizing for not being able to manage Mike's behavior in August of the same year, despite it being her job as producer.
Ultimately, I had been on the project only for about 3 years. I was hired specifically to fix a clusterfuck of a mess, mostly on the environment side, but really the whole project was just completely falling apart. There was only 2 years left. development. We had one level. I was just focusing on environments and levels as a lead. While I was there, I was overworked. I was working like 13 to 15 hours a day every other day. I was working on weekends, and all of it was just a disaster. She was supposedly hired to control him, like, because they had a previous friendship before she was hired as a producer. And that's why I would go to her and be like, yo, you need to like talk to your boy over here. It just felt like as long as his behavior wasn't directed towards them specifically, no one really cared. And that was like the most frustrating thing about it, which is why I was sharing it to begin with. Eventually I just deleted the post because I realized like how they were using it and spinning it to tell this false narrative and plead ignorance that they didn't know that this is how Mike was. And I mean, that's just bullshit.
And lastly, there's also her overall annoyance with Mike's inability to adhere to a schedule. Aside from the blatant plotting about leaving the company, on the inside, Francesca would take Beezul's side in private while publicly admonishing his outbursts towards Mike in the office.
She was like, you are in the right, you know, like she validated me. She was like, no, they don't know what they're doing, and you're right, we do need help, we don't have the resources we need. So she validated everything I was saying, and I'm like, basically, I broke down, I'm like, I'm very reasonable, and I'm just sick of people trying to paint me out to always be this bad guy when I'm very accommodating.
This obviously contributed to the team developing more hostility, but two wrongs don't make a right, and Francesca privately taking sides in internal disputes is not only unprofessional, but sends a mixed message that could potentially validate or even escalate the already growing conflict. This is someone who manages the staff going up to you and saying, no, yeah, you're right, your concerns are valid, I hate him too, which both answers and raises a ton of questions as far as her conduct management skills.
And the first official day that I worked at the studio, Franny and Mariel took me out to Elite's lunch, and they said, you have to sit next to Mike, ignore everything he fucking says, he's a fucking asshole. And they're like laughing about it, and I'm just like, whoa, that came out of nowhere. Like, really? It was super awkward. I didn't really know to say what at first, but then eventually, I swear I said this. I said, look, I'm pretty sure that guy has some form of autism. He might have a disability, and I really don't think he's an asshole. Whatever behavior he has, you do not want him to do, you probably just need to be really clear about that behavior, and you need to tell him to stop.
Looping back to her text in July, this was the same day that she held a meeting at her home to talk over the strategies mentioned earlier. According to Beezul, Francesca was sick of Mike and Mariel and wanted to start her own thing with him. She even went as far as allegedly disparaging Mariel to convince him to become the creative director and take her job.
Yeah, Franny's opinion of Mariel was not great. She would share a lot about her lack of management skills. Franny would mention that she just doesn't really know the strengths of her team, and she kind of ignores like half of the art team, doesn't meet up with leads, doesn't facilitate growth and a healthy work environment. She also would mention she just felt Mariel was unprofessional. She told me that she had secret Slack channels with her animation team, and that it was just them basically talking shit about people in the studio, and Franny really hated that a leader at the studio was doing that.
That was way back when you were even gonna leave before they made you CEO.
Yeah. No, but this is after. I think this is with the Mariel thing, where you were just like, I'm just so done with everyone, and it's just like, I don't want you to feel that way. Like, I don't want people to feel like they can't, like they're so frustrated that you just want to like, fuck it, I'm gonna leave.
Yeah, I mean, it was around that time that she was sharing these sort of grievances that she would invite me over to her home and say, hey, don't worry about this studio when Indivisible ships. Let's go ahead and make our own studio. And that's kind of when she started scheming and asking me, like, who do you think we can take from this studio to make our own studio?
Given that this was a conversation held in private, no one can say for sure what was said. But along with the text about strategizing, Franny confirms to Mariel that this conversation did take place, but it was because of Peter, and she changed her mind after Beezul cried while recounting his personal life and stress to her, stating that she believed he was emotionally unstable and needed to get therapy. That is a surprisingly dismissive tone to take with someone who's having emotional issues, coming from the woman who would use professional channels to message Mike for reassurance after telling him about how much of a failure she is. Do you guys remember that deal with Focus that everyone's fighting over? It turns out that Beezul, along with the help of others, was the one who was able to secure upwards of $5 million for the studio to develop this game. This was the deal that was going to save their studio, but even that came with its own set of problems.
At first, it was just kind of like, if you're Mariel and she says it's okay, you can work on the pitch, and those are the only people that can work on pitches. So they tried their hand at it, and frankly, all their pitches just failed. Eventually, she gave up and said no one else is allowed to work on pitches anymore. Peter stepped in and was like, this is my studio. We absolutely need to work on pitches. You do not call that shot. If we don't work on pitches, we're not going to be employed. So Peter and I, with the help of one other artist and Mike, we put together a couple of pitches, and one of them really picked up, and that's the focus deal that is like in these legal documents. And we landed this deal. I don't remember the exact amount, but it was like $5 or $6 million to make this game. All of a sudden, after like 7 months of me crunching and work on this pitch, like the animation team and Mariel, they're just like, we don't want to make this game. It was just really combative. I just couldn't put up with it, and I just walked out.
Why is it that the producer and lead environmental artist at the time both knew about conduct-related issues all the way in 2018? Yet when everyone's stories drop in 2020, everyone acts like it's a recent discovery thanks to their internal investigation. Well, that's because they're fucking lying. Duh. You see, Beezul brought up a lawsuit to Francesca during an altercation, but apologized for the legal threat all the way back in May of 2019. This is why you can see in the documents that Mariel and Francesca at times are worried about a claim from Max, who is Beezul. Francesca, Mariel, Earl, and others knew for a fact that they enabled Mike's behavior, which is why all of them avoided taking accountability in their public posts. The ethics of doing this while complaining about someone else's behavior is questionable. But what about their other claims, like Mike's unrealistic demands, or the countless stories told between employees that supposedly justified this public lynching? Thanks to viewers like you, I've obtained every single story compiled down to the last employee. But since not all of them are relevant, I'll only be going specifically over the employees who consented to having it public by signing over their declarations in the lawsuit. But first, let's answer what the intimidating tactics and potentially illegal demands from Mike, described by John and Brian, really are. I don't know exactly what Mike asked for as far as the terms of their separation, because that's either private or was done over a call. But I do know the details of his plan moving forward once he decided to stay. According to John's statement, this should include him refusing responsibility for his actions, and Brian said that he is clearly in direct opposition to the health of the employees. I've read his final email before everyone left that was sent on August 17th to the entire staff, where Mike is the only person, for the first time in Lab Zero's history, to enforce the inclusion of an HR department. He also added creating an employee handbook, that he's not terminating anyone, providing a safe means to communicate problems to him, while also stepping back into an advisory role as soon as possible. He further outlines that there might be issues with distributing his 100% equity, and feels legally obligated to stay to properly settle it. The biggest announcement, however, was that Mariel and Francesca were being removed from the board of directors for refusing to find legitimate ways to resolve conflict issues. This is what everyone is referring to when they say retaliation for speaking up about his behavior. It's this right here. Given that they were sitting board members, and it was the CEO and lead artist, they had a lot of influence in the company. They decided ahead of time that Mike would be fired no matter what, because at least 3 people decided that they would quit if Mike stayed at the company. And they were not willing to compromise 3 workers with no issues for 1 amazing worker with a ton of them. In their eyes, that was the conflict resolution. It's worth noting that Francesca did mention she was going to hire an HR company in the private group chat and was working on a handbook. But it's uncertain whether anyone informed Mike of these plans, or if she was even serious, because over a month later, and it still hadn't been implemented. Her being the CEO, I imagine she can get it done within that time frame. Although he was removing them from the board, he still made no changes to their wages, benefits, or duties whatsoever. Man, nothing screams illegal and intimidating quite like hiring a human resources department. But do you know what actually does sound potentially illegal? Using intimate knowledge of publisher deals to financially ruin the company you work for after getting demoted and realizing you're not getting your way. Actually, I'm pretty sure that is illegal, but somebody fact check me on that. Let's call in the lawyers at Morgan & Morgan.
How did you just do that? I'm a really good lawyer.
It'd also be insanely funny to then act like you didn't know that would financially bankrupt the company, costing coworkers their immediate jobs, when it's explained in the same email that their focus deal is delicate and to use good faith efforts to decide by the end of the month if they want to leave. And as they all know, if they actually waited till the end of the month, they might have had an argument to receive the additional $200,000 in their deal, and could have potentially paid out severance to employees, thus making their complaints about severance after the fact pretty ironic, considering they chose the most deliberate bad faith actions possible. If we want to talk about Mike changing his mind about leaving the company, he only initially got on board because Mariel and Francesca misrepresented a meeting with Focus by telling him they'd terminate that deal, $200,000 and more, unless he left. The company was doing a balancing act between the amount of debt that they already had and getting all the money that they needed from Focus. Regardless of this inaccuracy, Mike was still willing to leave to provide closure to those harboring resentment towards him. But he explained through a lengthy analogy using computer parts how if he left now, with the current state of the equity dispute, he'd be leaving them with a ticking time bomb. So to fulfill his legal obligations as an owner and senior board member, he would need to rectify the issue with shares in the internal conflict. Since board members like Mariel and Francesca couldn't land on any real solutions beyond just firing Mike, it only makes sense that he decided to stay. That leaves me with just one question though. How come after all their complaints about inappropriate behavior, would it take Mike's executive decision for them to finally incorporate a human resources department? That seems like the most obvious and immediate way to address these exact concerns. But instead, they spent all their time drafting up a Word document in a private group chat, which is now publicly available in their lawsuit against Lab Zero. We've already made it this far, so let's see what they were up to. The first one comes to us from Jennifer Seaman. No, I know it sounds like I'm pronouncing it wrong on purpose to be funny, but I swear to God I'm not, and that's where we're starting. Miss Seaman opens up about a time when she was a new employee sitting with another artist in a meeting. They were in the row behind Mike and began laughing, when Mike turned around with a dirty look on his face and told them to get a room. She was so humiliated and embarrassed because she did not think she was doing anything wrong. She then accused him of insinuating that they were flirting and states how it was rude and inappropriate for him to turn a conversation into something sexual. Oh my fucking God, this reads like fanfic. Get a room is a saying or expression that does originate from flirting and romantic relationships. But that application can change when used in a different context. Like when it's said sarcastically to two people laughing during a meeting, it doesn't literally mean go fuck in a hotel room. He probably just wanted you to shut up or save it for a more appropriate time. I don't think anyone else really has trouble understanding that, so, Next, she says Mike made a joke about her name in the company chat. Your name is Seaman, and it's pronounced Seaman, as in ejaculate. I'd be surprised if he didn't joke about it. Either change it, get married, or get over it. Lastly, and this is the most important one, guys, so listen up. Mike would ask how old she was turning on her birthday. The uncomfortability described here is tantamount to your family secretly telling the Applebee's waiter it's your birthday so they'll start singing for you. Do you know how insane the private circle jerk must have been for Seaman to unload all this onto Mike's unsuspecting face? Okay, I'm sorry, I had to get one more in there. Next is from Jonathan Kim, who you may recognize as Persona-sama from his public resignation. How can he possibly follow Miss Seaman? Why, in the bathroom, of course. In 2009, Lab Zero was known as Reverge Labs, and at this company, there was a small employee bathroom that could only fit one at a time. As John was doing his business, Mike was waiting outside for his turn. After they both were done, Mike went up to John and mentioned that he noticed a pube on the toilet seat and accused him of masturbating inside the bathroom, when he never did. That's an awfully long bathroom break. Found a pube on the seat. Did you masturbate? John knew that Mike had power over him, and he was helpless to stop these false accusations of self-gratification. It traumatized him into being overly critical of his work hygiene, and 11 years later, not once has a single groin fiber stained the pristine porcelain of a work toilet. On another occasion, Mike began making fun of a coworker's significant other's last name. She was Chinese, and her last name was Dong. I think you can see where I'm going with this. But it doesn't end there. Mike would even allegedly offer hugs, gifts, snacks, or to buy people lunch so they'd be more willing to help him or agree on project decisions. Disgusting. Ugh, what the fuck? Brian June said they were looking at art one day, and Mike told them to focus on the balls. You gonna look at them balls today, please, in between games of whatever. Okay, thanks. Examine the balls closely. Actually, that's not a joke. People gotta remember to do those. Is this a lawsuit, or are they pitching me a Netflix comedy special? Cause I'm sold. Only other thing Brian complained about is that he has an ego and more jokes. Go figure. Emily Young starts by saying he told her she had nice legs at a Skullgirls event before she was even an employee. She didn't like that. Fair enough. Her other story is that she attempted to run his event called Salty as an online tournament for the community during lockdown. Mike criticized her for not having all the appropriate links for its promotion on social media because she had all week to prepare for it. This is one of the first interactions where Mike is actually sounding like a real boss. Emily then says that Mike's messages were anxiety-inducing and that, as of right now, this very moment, she did not have the time or resources to pull it off. Mike responded by saying, "If you need space, don't run anything people are relying on you for." And I have to agree. Why would you volunteer to run something knowing full well that you can't deliver a finished product? Especially when it's someone else's passion project that you're taking on and cutting corners with? That's a little disrespectful. So I can't exactly agree with this self-pitying portrayal in her declaration, but I can see how complimenting someone's legs can be uncomfortable or harmless depending on who you're talking to. That's a totally fair point, but I mean, you weren't an employee at that time, so I don't know how relevant that is to this lawsuit, but Earl heard him talking about his genitals. Who gives a fuck? You're a massive hypocrite. He also heard other inappropriate jokes, told him not to tell it. He said it anyways. Oh my god, who cares? Earl, you talked about warm and wet sex and dick and balls on the reg. You single-handedly look like the biggest jackass out of all these declarations. And that's saying something. That's a hard thing to do here. All right, on to Mariel and Francesca. Francesca, much like Mariel, explains that throughout her employment, Mike engaged in a pervasive campaign of sexual harassment by commenting on things like her legs and referring to her as hot. According to Mike, they were so close that there were no secrets between the two, and she would routinely confide in him about her marriage, sex life, menstruation, thoughts, and emotional well-being. As far as the talk of menstruation and being an outlet for her emotional baggage, this is directly proven through the company messages. Francesca also already admitted herself that he stopped the comments the moment she told him it made her uncomfortable, so I'm not exactly sure what campaign she's referring to here. This was not well thought out. She doesn't add anything else beyond the emails of everyone leaving, describing the creation of a private group chat for the employees to vent about Mike, and an email chain where she argues about using a COVID loan to pay people severance, but as Mike concluded, with the help of the accountant she hired, because of a significant drop in employees from the pre-COVID levels, they might be disallowed from using the funds entirely. It also didn't help that the only money they had now would be those loans, which could also disqualify them from using it. We finally made it. The last and arguably most serious declaration of all, Mariel's. The funny thing is, I don't actually disagree with almost anything she says in her declaration. In a vacuum. You may already know what I'm referring to here, but let's properly show her claims and evidence first. Again, we're opening with a pervasive campaign of sexual harassment and a report of this behavior in 2011 when she first worked at Reverge Labs. A log of this is provided, which is surprising considering how long ago it was. A summary of the complaints is that he whispered to her that's one hell of a digestive system you've got there after using the bathroom after her, which I'll admit is weird. 2, foot massages, which I don't know how you could get away with without some form of consent unless he's just like ripping her socks off in the cubicle and going to town. 3, asking her to come over. And 4, suggesting they have sex because his wife isn't active. Those are 100% valid concerns, and considering the last complaint, insanely inappropriate if it's a true and unbiased recollection of events. After which, Mariel stated, "Yeah, I told him he knows I don't like him, and I will only talk to him about work now." Yeah, I'm sure you did. Next, she includes that he told her, "Your thighs look amazing." The context to this next one is provided, but it's so out of left field that I really don't know why he said it. Unless there's some insane callback or inside joke I'm missing here, I'm lost. I don't know why he said it. Lastly, he suggests in response to her not being able to go to sleep that masturbation or problem solving is an easy way to relax the body or mind depending on the source of the problem. There's another story about her getting offended by hearing Mike tell Earl an inappropriate joke, but fuck Earl and who cares. Mike undoubtedly talked about a lot of sexual things. I can maybe buy the case in 2011 at Reverge Lab, but what about the rest of Mariel's time at Lab Zero? Well, if it's unprompted and unwelcome, surely the woman who stated she'd only talk about work in 2011 and didn't mind talk of sexuality as long as it wasn't her personal info or experience wouldn't— oh, that's her talking about her sex life and inflamed vagina in his DMs, isn't it? Well, it couldn't have happened more than one. Prostitution, threesomes, and open relationships. Well, at least their conversations weren't so degenerate that they had a safe word, right? Are you fucking kidding me? Okay, how about this? It was a purely work relationship, so it's in a... God damn it! If you ignore every single way that Mariel made sex a topic, brought up her body, sex life, and their obvious personal friendship, Mike is 100% guilty for every comment he ever made. But you can't remove all context, point to it being a boss to subordinate interaction in the same conversation you established your friends, and convince me you have nothing to do with it. This is a small company dispute that spans over 10 years, not a corporate complaint about your shift manager at Wendy's. You both behaved insanely inappropriate as far as a work relationship is supposed to function, and either of you at any point could have fucked over the other by disingenuously clipping up random shit into the Frankenstein's monster of an HR dispute. But just for the fuck of it, let's go over he accused her of dressing provocatively and complained that her dress made it other people's responsibility to safeguard themselves from interacting in a way that she found inappropriate. Here's a specific example from Halloween. Mike came to a Halloween party without a shirt, and the joke was that he's a guy who came in his pants. Funny, but that is inappropriate for an office party, unless they've established ahead of time that it's okay and everything's been ironed out, besides his jeans. But I don't think dressing up as a sexy version of Jason Voorhees or Freddy Krueger is appropriate office attire either. And I don't mean sexy as in my personal opinion. Let me be very clear, I mean that you're exposing your entire stomach, wearing incredibly short shorts and thigh highs with heels. This is the real-life equivalent of the flirting versus harassment meme. Or even more literally, empowering versus put on a shirt, Michael. Being sexually provocative is not less worse than a sexual joke. That's exactly why dress codes exist in the first place. If Mike feels like speaking up about Mariel wearing skimpy clothing in the office, he's just as much within his right as she is to discuss the level of comfortability. Of course, this was resolved by buying dividers, Mike putting on a shirt, and Mariel continuing to dress however she wanted. That's all of their stories. And do you want to know what I think after reading all of them and researching this case for 3 months? It's that these people are histrionic narcissists who prioritize their own feelings in every conversation, and when something doesn't go their way, will dig up the buried corpses of drama and throw the collective 10 years of baggage right back in your face, while simultaneously insisting they're your friend. When I first came to the story, I did my absolute best to reach out to as many people as possible. I even got a response from Mariel, but she wasn't willing to put me in contact with more people because of the lawsuit and all this other stuff. Other people aren't responding for comment. I even added the story from Kim MacAskill where she points out that Mike's attorney fed her lies. But between the denying accountability, corrupt journalism, out of context quotes, stories, and people using the word employees and friend interchangeably, I can't take it anymore. I can't. Am I really supposed to ignore the fact that they facilitated these sexual conversations, enabled the behavior, lied about enabling it, and then collectively put all the blame on the fucking autistic guy? Because if we're all on the fuck Mike train, and we all agree, what does that say about them when all of this is happening and they look him dead in the eyes and say, let's be friends? Who needs enemies when you have friends like this? This concludes my investigation into Lab Zero. A sincere thank you to everyone who responded for comment, and to my own community who not only let me know this was happening, but gave me the tools to put the pieces together. That is also why I'm now opening an anonymous tip line where you can send unsolved stories like this to make my job of finding them that much easier. I know I'm gonna get accused of this anyways, but who cares? I was not paid to say this next part. For those of you that want to support Mike and his future work, he does not work at Skullgirls anymore, okay? He's now working on the game Beezul Legacy: The Brazen Age, developed by Maximum Games. It's a 4-player fighting game split into a co-op 2v2 with 3 lanes of combat. I've never seen that style before personally, but it looks kinda cool. So check out their open beta and its launch in 2024 if you're interested. If you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe for more content. And if you want to further support my investigations, consider joining the Patreon. Thanks to them and Morgan, I have an unlimited supply of ramen noodles while reading court documents until I pass out. Alright, that's enough shilling from me. Happy holidays, everyone, and as always, until next time.